Hey guys, it's Brandon Adams here live at the UGA bookstore for our Dixie Vodka Postgame Show. Jeff Sentell going to be here in just a moment. We'll talk about everything that goes down for Georgia and its 53-28 win over Missouri here tonight. A lot to digest from this, both the good and the bad here. The good is the fact that Georgia gets another somewhat easy win, certainly a comfortable margin of victory, not quite covering the Vegas spread, but a somewhat comfortable margin of victory. The bad here, of course, is some of the issues that show up with the Georgia defense, some injury concerns here. Some of that may be somewhat serious, some of that maybe not quite so much. So we'll kind of digest it all here on the Dixie Vodka Postgame Show coming up for you tonight. As I said, Jeff Sentell will be here in just a moment. We'll get your comments up and running here as well as we kind of figure out where things are for Georgia moving into a bye week next week. And then obviously 2 weeks from now, the showdown in Jacksonville, the one that matters to so many of us, that game against the Florida Gators. We'll also have plenty of your comments coming up here as well. Comment section for me moving a little slowly here right now with my internet, so give me a second to get that up and running. We'll get that taken care of in just a moment and talk to you as much as we possibly can tonight about this Georgia victory over the Missouri Tigers. Let me start with what we do know now, and we'll get updates throughout the night on this as the conversation continues. But what we do know now about Georgia wide receiver Terry Godwin, who obviously leaves the game with a rib injury, is seen back on the sideline again later on in the game, but not obviously going back in. The only update we got officially from Georgia on Godwin's status during the game was that he was out for now. And obviously when Kirby Smart speaks to the media here in just a few minutes, I guess the question will be, is he able to provide any more update than that on what we already know about Godwin, which was his ribs were banged up enough for him to come out of the game, banged up enough for him to go into the locker room and get some help, and then banged up enough that he was basically ruled out for this game and not coming back in. Obviously, this is one of those scenarios where Georgia did have a comfortable margin of victory, did have a comfortable margin for most of the second half, so maybe that plays into the decision not to play Godwin in the second half. But there's also some reason to believe that maybe this is the kind of thing that's going to be more serious than just that. When you look at Georgia's wide receiving core, obviously this was a big night for Georgia in terms of getting playmakers involved in the action. But when you think about those crucial games that come for Georgia for the rest of the season, the Florida game in a couple of weeks, the Auburn games really a couple weeks after that, include the South Carolina game in this discussion, maybe Georgia Tech, and then whatever happens in the month of December and January. Obviously, Godwin is one of those crucial receiving targets for Georgia to really keep Jake Fromm comfortable and keep Jake Fromm. Godwin has really kind of proven to be one of his most dependable targets coming into tonight's game. Godwin had the 5 touchdowns. This is a guy that Fromm has had a lot of trust with. This is a guy that Fromm has developed a bit of a rapport with. So obviously here going into a bye week, this is one of those things that Georgia fans will be kind of waiting with bated breath on to find out more about Terry Godwin. I think Georgia's offense at its best really requires and relies on a Terry Godwin having a big performance. My comments are coming very slow here on the computer. Let me see if I can pull these up on the phone. We'll take some comments via phone here for a moment. As I'm doing that, I'll remind you that this is the Dixie Vodka Postgame Show. We're live here at the bookstore. And by the way, I feel like I'm looking pretty good tonight. I've got the Nike coaches shirt from our friends at the UGA bookstore. We do our show each and every Saturday here on UGA home games from the second floor of the UGA bookstore. But down on the first floor, they've got all the UGA apparel you could ever want, whether it be the Peter Millar line, including the Uga 10 line from Peter Millar. You've seen Jeff Sentell and I wearing stuff from Peter Millar here on the Dixie Vodka Postgame Show. Also the great Nike stuff like this. But you've got the Tommy Bahama there as well, and really a whole host of great apparel choices, no matter what you want. This is true for men, women, boys, girls. It's all there for you on the first floor of the UGA bookstore. They're open right now, so if you're watching our show on your way out of Sanford Stadium, make sure you come on by and see us. They're here to take care of all your UGA apparel needs. You're going to want to stock up, especially with fall coming. They got the quarter-zip pullovers and things like that. So you're going to want all of that. Make sure you check that out at the UGA bookstore. Of course, I want to thank Dixie Vodka for bringing the Dixie Vodka postgame show to us as well. I say this all the time. Dixie Vodka is the South's best-tasting vodka. When it comes to college football in the South this time of year, there's a lot of debates going on, a lot of discussions being had, but there is no debate, no discussion when it comes to Dixie Vodka. It is unquestionably the South's best-tasting Vodka. So we'll talk to you more about that. I've got some comments here. I'll pull these up on my phone, and we'll kind of rattle through some of these until Jeff Sentell is able to get here. TJ Maynard says, what's the injury with Godwin? So, TJ, what we know right now is this is a rib injury for Godwin. The official ruling you got from Georgia on this was that he was out for now, was seen going into the locker room for treatment, then came back onto the field out of his uniform and just watching the game on the sideline, essentially as a spectator there in the second half. We'll wait to hear if we get any kind of update from Kirby Smart on this this evening when he speaks to the media here in just a couple of minutes. We'll find out that as we kind of all kind of pay attention to this here tonight. So that's obviously a big storyline for Georgia kind of coming off of this game here. Daniel Moore says, hate that they got 28 points on us, but we won big still. It is true that Georgia did get a somewhat comfortable lead, even though that it did have the issue, with the giving up more points tonight than it's given up at any point this season, and really seeing that vulnerability kind of exploited tonight. And we know what the vulnerability is for the Georgia defense. We know this is a group that has had trouble and would have trouble if it was ever really challenged with a vertical passing attack. Georgia's got a really strong front seven, terrific linebackers, defensive linemen. The secondary is a group for Georgia that I think did have some Georgia fans concerned. It's been a big topic on DawgNation Daily, the show that I do every day for DawgNation.com. I know that Seth Emerson wrote a piece about this at DawgNation.com this week about what would happen if a passing offense really challenged the Georgia secondary. We found out tonight it would not be great, and certainly Georgia had its challenges. We'll talk more about that coming up throughout the show. Timothy Spradley says, we beat Florida. The East is ours. And, Timothy, that's one of the reasons why we've circled this Georgia-Florida game so much on DawgNation Daily, the show that I do daily, it is supposed to be the rivalry for Georgia that matters more than any other. And even with Florida, and yes, the Gators do lose tonight, but even with Florida losing tonight, it is still that game for Georgia that it's a big step towards owning the East here in 2017. And accomplishing a lot of great postseason goals and big things that could happen for the Dogs, well, a lot of that wholly dependent on going out and getting that win in Jacksonville in a couple of weeks. Bye week probably comes at a good time for Georgia, and we'll kind of talk about some of those reasons why. Elizabeth Odell says, great job, love my Dogs, great job, Coach. So proud, love my Dogs. Elizabeth, appreciate you weighing in tonight. Justin Sisk said, I would have thought jump to 2, but not giving up 28 points. Justin, I don't know that there's necessarily a whole lot of scoreboard watching when it comes to Georgia on this. I don't know that you'll see a lot of nitpicking, by the pollsters, both in the coaches poll, the AP poll, about Georgia's ranking here. Remember, Penn State does not play today. Penn State plays Ohio State next week, so bye week for Penn State. So I don't know that there was much of a justification on the part of the national media to leapfrog Georgia over Penn State anyway. So I think that, even if Georgia had won, 60-0 tonight, I'm not quite sure there would have been the motivation to move Georgia up to number 2 in the polls. And giving up 28 points here, I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of reason to downgrade Georgian polls as well. I mean, you compare this win for Georgia to some of the others and other performances from top 10 teams this week. Obviously, Georgia got a lot more to be thankful about here tonight than some other top 10 teams, including Auburn, which lost today, Clemson and Washington State, which lost last night. Michigan, I guess, was not really a top 10 team anymore, but it got all it wanted from Indiana today. So we've seen top 10 teams threatening, many of them here this weekend have gone down to defeat. Georgia obviously lucky enough to still get a comfortable win and nitpick some of the things they didn't like about itself. Brad Taylor gives a good stat here, 7-0 for the first time since 2005. Brad, appreciate you weighing in on that. Tammy DeFore says, love my Dogs. Tammy, thanks for weighing in tonight on the Dixie Vodka Postgame Show. James Crump says, and by the way, James, congratulations to you for winning those Georgia-Florida tickets with Jeff on his giveaway. James says, Eason's out at quarterback, in my opinion. We're riding Fromm from here on out. And listen, James, we'll talk more about Fromm's performance as we move on throughout the Dixie Vodka Postgame Show tonight. But I'll tell you, I thought that Fromm tonight took another step forward towards really solidifying his place as Georgia's quarterback. And this is not meant in any way to slight Jacob Eason. This is not a shot at Eason. But Fromm is getting better. Fromm was okay in September, and here in the month of October, he's getting better. We talked about yards per attempt on DawgNation Daily this week. One of those ways of really kind of intersecting a quarterback's accuracy with his explosiveness, deep throws compared to how accurate you are. And what we saw from Fromm again tonight was another really high-rated performance in that regard. He was over 10 yards per attempt for most of the night. I'm assuming he probably finished that way as well. We'll look at the final stats here in a moment. So through no fault of Jacob Eason, right now Jake Fromm is in the midst of earning this quarterback job, and I think you've got to give him some credit for that. Let me get some more comments here. Zach Welburn says, what's better than a UGA win? A Florida loss. Zach, you're 100% right about that. Chris Little says, secondary played like they were enjoying homecoming activities late last night. So, Chris, I totally understand why that's going to be a bit of a topic today that, hey, Georgia maybe was due for its letdown, homecoming, distraction, rat poison, to use the Nick Saban line. I know there's going to be that thought that kind of exists out there. Here's what I really believe is true about the Georgia secondary, and I look forward to talking some more to Jeff Sentell about this in just a moment when he's with us. I think that guys can only play above their talent level for so long. And at a certain point, the talent level is just going to kind of be we're going to be reminded what that talent level was. You've got a lot of players in that Georgia secondary right now who should be commended for getting as much as they've gotten out of their skill set. Aaron Davis was a former walk-on, and he's always, as a Georgia defensive back, played better than that. You've got guys who are former three-star guys. You've got, guys that don't really have the profile of, a major 4- and 5-star defensive back, and yet they've played better. But at a certain point in time, there is just a moment when you come back to earth. There is a moment when you're reminded, oh, yeah, so this is what the skill set really is. And I think you saw that from the Georgia secondary tonight. There is an element of what's going on with the Georgia secondary and what you saw tonight that won't be fixed in 2017. If Georgia's going to win the SEC, if Georgia's going to go to the college football playoff, if Georgia's going to have some great miraculous season, it's going to have to do that by coaching and playing around some deficiencies in the secondary. You know when Georgia gets a better secondary? In 2018, when some of the freshmen on this year's team are a year older. And you know when Georgia's secondary gets a lot better? Maybe by 2019, when you have guys that you added for the class of 2018. And we'll talk to Jeff about some of those names. We've talked about them before. But pretty clearly, Gilbert Frierson's paying close attention to what's happening in Georgia. Tyson Campbell's paying close attention to what's happening in Georgia. These are some of the elite defensive backs of the class of 2018. What's going to fix Georgia's secondary is recruiting. And you're not going to see that unfold here until probably the next couple of recruiting cycles. There is an element of, for the 2017 season, the Georgia secondary sort of is what it is. And Georgia's championship hopes depend on getting the most out of it can and also finding a way to minimize its impact on the game by utilizing a better pass rush and things like that. Obviously, the secondary is going to be a big talk on today's show. I completely get where that comes from. The Dawgs secondary got torched today. But there's only so much this group's going to be able to do with the experience and talent level that it brings to the table. Let me hit a few more comments here. Jake Perez says, first freshman quarterback to go 7-0 since David Green. Jake, that's an interesting stat. Of course, Green was a redshirt freshman in 2001 from the true freshman here right now. Stacy Goebel says, winning is winning. Margin of victory means nothing at this point. D-Lun Pan says, this is the first time we didn't cover the spread. We were giving 30, right? Yeah. So Georgia did not cover the spread tonight. Is there another game this season where Georgia didn't cover the spread? Covered the spread as an underdog against Notre Dame. Michael works with this. Can you think of another? Is that Georgia's first game this season not to cover the spread? It may have been. Justin Vetter says, what's my thoughts on the crazy upsets this weekend? Well, Justin, when I think about those crazy upsets, right now I do think about those in the context of Georgia and what it's trying to do. And what you realize is that it's not always about distractions and it's not always about, stubbing your toe in the past, and Georgia's kind of dealt with some of that. Sometimes college football can just be a really weird sport. If Clemson and Syracuse played again next Saturday, are we to believe that Syracuse would win that game again? I think for most of us, we'd probably think, no, they probably won't. But last night, that's what happened. That's one of the reasons why I'm encouraging Georgia fans as much as possible just to enjoy this season for what it brings. Every single Saturday, every single opportunity. There's nothing wrong with pointing what happened today and say this needs to be better and that's not good enough and who can we recruit to help raise the level of performance of this position group. There's nothing wrong with talking about that. But let's also appreciate the fact if you're a Georgia fan that this was a win and Georgia gets to move on and they stay in that club of undefeated teams. I believe it's just down to, 11 teams in the country right now who are still undefeated? That's a group getting smaller and smaller by the week, and for now Georgia gets to be a part of that. So the number one headline above probably anything else is the fact that Georgia certainly gets to enjoy and appreciate a very high national ranking and a nice presence as an undefeated team at the moment. Steve Schaffini says Penn State's about to go through the teeth of its schedule, and that is certainly true with Ohio State coming next week and some big games coming after that. That Big Ten East is a tough division, and Penn State's about to be challenged there. PJ Sitton says we should at least be ranked number 3. My guess is in both polls, PJ, that probably is where Georgia will be ranked. Destin Baker says, update on Terry Godwin. Let's talk some more about Godwin. So what we know up to this point is that Godwin leaves the game with a rib injury. Godwin leaves the game with a rib injury. He goes back to the locker room, gets treated. There was a report from, I believe it was one of the Rivals writers, that his family was invited to go into the locker room. I can't confirm that myself, but that's what the Rivals writer wrote about on that. And then Godwin was seen back later on the sideline, and not in uniform anymore, and the official ruling from Georgia was that he was out for now during that point in the game, and obviously he does not come back in. This is one of those things that Georgia's obviously going to be paying very close attention to, and there'll be some really significant concerns for Georgia on Terry Godwin, and as soon as we hear something from Kirby Smart, we'll tell you what we know on that. All right, let me throw the final stats up here on our Dixie Vodka Postgame Show. Actually, before I do that, let me remind you that my name is Brandon Adams, and Jeff Sentell is going to be here in a moment. We're live here today on the Dixie Vodka Postgame Show from the UGA Bookstore. And you'll love the UGA Bookstore. We're here after each and every Georgia home game. It's a great spot for all your UGA apparel needs, including the Nike Coaches shirt that I'm wearing right now. This got the sweat-wicking material, the moisture-wicking material, super comfortable. It's actually a great cut as well. And I was thinking as I put this thing on, wow, this thing even looks good on me. Imagine how good it's going to look on you if this looks the way that it does on me. I'm really proud of this. I love the apparel at the UGA Bookstore, but it's not just the Nike stuff. They've got Vineyard Vines. They've got Tommy Bahama. They have got the Peter Millar line, including the Uga 10 line from Peter Millar. You can get all that at the UGA Bookstore. And, of course, we are here on the Dixie Vodka Postgame Show, and we say it all the time that Dixie Vodka is the South's best-tasting vodka, made in the South by people from the South for people right here in the South. Hope you enjoyed some Dixie Vodka at your tailgate today, and we appreciate you being with us here on the Dixie Vodka Postgame Show. All right, tricky here in the fact that I can't see these stats, but we'll throw them up on the screen anyway. Let me see if I can take a look at what we have here on my website. We'll see if we can get a little more of the update on this. Having a little bit of an internet issue. So I've got total yards for Georgia at 696. That's 370 rushing yards, 326 through the air. Missouri does get over 300 today. 253 yards through the air, and I believe this is as a final as Georgia wins 53-28. I mean, I think the one thing that you'll notice here is while Georgia does give up a lot of stuff through the air, when you don't give up anything on the ground, and Georgia only gives up the 59 yards rushing from Missouri here, that's still a recipe for victory. Yes, you're going to have some moments when the secondary got torched, and obviously the Fromm turnover played a big role in Missouri being able to stay in this thing early. But Georgia, once again, was able to completely dominate the rush defense. Now, DeMaurier Crockett, the good running back for Missouri, does leave the game with an injury himself, so that impacts the Tigers' ability to run the football, and they had the botched fourth down as well on the punt that subtracts some of that rushing total. But overall, this was a Georgia performance here that was really strong in rush defense, and therefore, when you're not allowing your opponent to rush the football, then you're going to find a way to win most of those games, even when they were able to get some passing yardage. Jeff Sentell is making his way up to the set here. We'll bring him in on the Dixie Vodka postgame show. And Jeff, we're running through comments. A little bit of an internet issue for me, so I don't have quite the real-time comments that we normally have. We'll try to take as many through phone as we can possibly get, and then if my phone goes dead, I may get you to whip yours out here in a moment as well. Let me start, though, with your general thoughts on the game. Some people are weighing in on two major points right now, Jeff. You'll join us in the midst of a conversation on Dog fans concerned about Terry Godwin and Dog fans concerned about this UGA secondary. Those have been the two big points that have come up so far here in the Dixie Vodka postgame show.
Two very good points to start talking about. Okay, here's what we know about Terry Godwin. Terry Godwin what was told in the press box is he has a rib injury. A rib injury. There's also some speculations that he has a different injury, but we're going to stick with the rib injury right now.
Okay.
I saw him return to the field under his own power. Nothing was bound. Nothing was taped up. Looks like rib injury, some sort of internal injury, is kind of close to the mark there.
Okay, so that's what's going on with Terry Godwin. You saw him on the sideline, as you said. No kind of visible bandages, no visible wrappings there, and so often those visible wrappings are kind of a clue about where things are going. My guess is, I'm trying to refresh Twitter to kind of see what's being said here, but my guess is we won't hear much from Kirby Smart on this tonight because A, Smart's not going to know very much about this, and B, it probably behooves him to play his cards close to the vest on this. He's got 2 weeks to get Godwin healthy again. Yeah,
all the MDs out there could sit there and think maybe this is like a pulled muscle in his rib cage injury. It might even be something like a kidney issue. Nobody really knows for certain. But what you do know is that Terry Godwin came back on the field. He was under his own power, but he was walking pretty gingerly, my man. He was probably walking about that 42-second 40 type speed right there.
Yeah.
That's probably what he was going. He was very gingerly. He had that Fred Sanford walk. He looked like he was kind of ambling up the sideline there.
So talk to me about this UGA secondary for a moment, because we talked about this a moment ago. And the point that I made is that this is the group you have for this year. And at a certain point in time, your talent level is, and if you've been playing above that talent level, this Georgia secondary for a number of years now, Aaron Davis, former walk-on, has always played better than that. You've got some three-star guys, some undersized three-star guys who played better than that in a Georgia uniform. But at a certain point in time, what the back of your football card says or your recruiting profile says, it said that for a reason, and right now this is the group that Georgia has. And credit to Georgia for getting as much out of this group as it has gotten, but drastic improvements in this group are not going to happen for another couple of recruiting cycles. When the 2017 kids get older, the 2018 kids are brought in, that's when this group gets drastically better. But for now, this is the group you got to dance with here a little bit.
It's kind of like we're playing poker, Brandon, and if you draw about 4 or 5 cards, that means you got nothing back there in your hand. Well, Georgia signed about 7 defensive backs in the last recruiting cycle, which shows, A, there's some issues there. And then I can remember Kirby Smart in press conferences this year. He was a little ticked about how his defense was giving up way too many big plays, way too many explosive plays. And you saw, I think it was a confluence of factors today. You've got Missouri's quarterback. First of all, that kid's got a Sunday arm. He was letting some loose. And the other thing is Georgia was playing a cover 3 earlier in the game. Cover 3, what Georgia's trying to do there is you should never give up the deep ball right there. But those corners, as we know, those are not 5-star corners on the sidelines right now on the islands for Georgia. Georgia was not getting any pressure, and they were roasted a couple times tonight.
Absolutely. Let me take this back to a positive place here. We'll talk about Jake Fromm coming up in just a moment. Let me remind you that is Jeff Sentell. My name's Brandon Adams. It's the Dixie Vodka Postgame Show live here from the UGA bookstore. Of course, Dixie Vodka is the South's best-tasting vodka. We appreciate them bringing the Dixie Vodka Postgame Show to us and appreciate you being with us. And by the way, if you're in Athens right now, you can still be with us. We're going to be here for a good bit longer here on the second floor of the UGA bookstore. So come on by the first floor. Check out all the apparel needs for you there at the UGA bookstore, including Tommy Bahama, the Nike shirts that Jeff and I are wearing. Jeff got the nice black here. I've got the by the way, I can feel a little moisture coming to this one. Jeff must have been really running to get here. I feel a little sweat coming through the shirt, if you don't mind me saying.
Well, that's moisture wicking. That's what it's doing. This is actually product testing.
The moisture is actually being wicked as we speak right now.
They saw a gentleman kind of being a blur up those steps, kind of going around the Tate bookstore, because I was like, man, Brandon's got a show to do. I got to get there.
Well, we appreciate you being here for that. All right, so let me talk about Jake Fromm for a moment, because I thought that Fromm took a real big step tonight towards completely establishing himself as Georgia's quarterback. And that's not a shot at Jacob Eason. That's not a knock on Eason. And to a certain extent, it's almost unfair to Eason because Eason cannot find that moment, that opportunity to get back on the football field. But this was another one of those days where you have to say, with Fromm playing the way that he's playing right now, you just can't take him out of the game. I thought that Georgia desperately needed Fromm today. Missouri was selling out to stop the run early and having success doing that. Drew Lock, the Missouri quarterback, was finding some receivers, and this was a football game. And Georgia doesn't get a comfortable lead and eventually a comfortable win. It doesn't get that today without Jake Fromm.
Man, I can filibuster all the things that kind of sprout up in my mind right now, Brandon, about that. First of all, let's call them this kind of like Jeff's takeaways about this game right here. Number one, Georgia comes 4 yards shy of hitting 700 yards of total offense. 696 total yards of offense tonight. Jake Fromm has 142 yards passing in the first quarter. Ends up with 326 yards, 18 out of 26, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. That was kind of like the Jake Fromm that threw it around at Houston County with all those big rambunctious passing nights for Houston County as a senior for those Bears. And You keep looking. Georgia hit 696, Brandon. I kind of want to like shake the Facebook camera right here.
Yeah.
696 yards of offense in a SEC conference game. Now, I know Missouri had been shredded by a lot of people before.
I mean, it really is a terrible defense.
It is. And
that's one of the reasons I'm not going to get that excited about it, because Missouri's defense is terrible. They threw all 11 guys that trying to stop the Georgia running game. They can only do that for a half. Georgia had open receivers everywhere, but Fromm still deserves credit for hitting them.
I will say this, Missouri, and I'm going to say this the nicest way I possibly can, maybe even a little bit too much of Southern gentleman right here. Missouri played without discipline in several moments of the game. Now, read into that all you want. You can read it to it and say, like, played a little dirty, late hits, targeting.
There's a lot of that, yeah.
There were guys that almost every play, especially when Georgia had the lead. Remember, this was a boat race at the end. This was 21-21 at one point. And then Georgia rips off 26 straight points to go up 47-21. Now, there's a lot of hot rod field goals in the middle of that. But the main thing is this. Once the lead stretched out, Missouri lost its composure and lost its focus and was just trying to maybe take some anguish out on the red jerseys.
Steve Schaffini reminding us they got shredded by Purdue, and they absolutely did. And you're going to be kinder to Missouri than I am. Frankly, I think Missouri's presence in the SEC waters down this league. I think it's an embarrassment when you come into Athens. You know, it used to be in the old days of the SEC, an SEC team coming to your stadium, you sort of had some expectation of what to expect there. There was going to be a band, even if it was just a pep band. There was going to be a collection of fans. Missouri brings no fans, no band. They don't feel like an SEC school. They're not really a southeastern school anyway, but they don't feel like an SEC school. And Barry Odom's not an SEC caliber coach. They clearly don't have an SEC caliber roster. They're getting, completely torched, Saturday in, Saturday out. Frankly, the SEC became a worse league when Missouri joined the league.
Would you like to trade them back to the Big 12, sir, for some Bluebonnet ice cream or something like that?
I don't think Missouri in its current state provides anything for this league.
I tell you, the way they look today and the way they looked at times, I mean, Brandon, we almost – remember how we've kind of kicked around on our shows that I'm going to say Georgia's running game is going to have 3 guys right around 100 yards eventually in one game before? So Swift, I think, ends up with about 90. They've got 4 guys almost at 50 yards or more today against Missouri, and they don't have a whole lot of defense. But, again – takeaways, big things there. Everybody's going to worry about Georgia's pass defense, but that was something everybody thought about before. They were getting lit up a little bit in practice. You saw Vanderbilt move the chains as well, but let's also kind of just reel it in for a second, because everybody's going to start thinking about, Georgia. Got to remember this. A, Clemson lost this week.
Right.
B, Trenton Thompson, street close.
Yeah. David
Marshall, street close.
And we'll talk more about those guys coming up in a moment,
Inside linebacker, street close. Daquan Hawkins-Muckle, street close. Terry Godwin, second half, street close.
Tyler Clark leaves the game for at least a portion.
Tyler Clark's. So then what it became really to me is Georgia's 8-9-man deep defensive front, especially at the tackle spot, kind of withered down to about maybe 3-4 guys. Ledbetter was playing a lot. Malik Herring was playing a lot in early. And what about Monty Rice? Monty Rice, I think, got first series snaps, making a lot of plays at inside linebacker tonight.
I think Monty Rice is one of those examples of a guy. Sometimes a guy is just better than his 3-star. I mean, he's just a better player than that. Monty Rice is just, he was a composite 3-star, right? He's just a better player than that. I mean, he looked good in spring. He's a big linebacker. He's going to be a run stopper. He's a thumper. He's just a better linebacker than a 3-star player. And I love the recruiting services. I love their rankings. I read them every day. But Monty Rice is better than 3 stars.
I think one of the things that I guess I kind of call on my experience for here, Brandon, is I sit there and I go, 3 stars. Okay, let me see what we got. I saw that with Walter Grant. I saw it with Monty Rice. These were guys, when they were being recruited, they were much, much better than that 3-star ranking. Walter Grant's playing right away as a freshman. Monty Rice, I remember seeing him play high school football, Brandon. He had like fumble recoveries for touchdowns. He blocked punts. He had a pick 6 he took back. He was running fake punts. He was sacks, interceptions, forced fumbles, caused fumbles, tackles for losses. The guy basically did it all in northern Alabama. And I knew he was going to have a great career at Georgia.
All right, can we run through some comments here? It's Dixie Vodka Postgame Show. That's Jeff Sentell. I'm Brandon Adams. We're live here at the UGA Bookstore. We're brought to you by Dixie Vodka, the South's best-tasting vodka. Rob Cohn saying, how is Terry Godwin? Let me update this one more time. We'll do it several times because I know we have people joining us in the broadcast throughout. It is a rib injury for Godwin. That's the official word from Georgia. During the game, the official word was out for now. Godwin does go into the locker room, is treated there in the locker room, is seen back on the sideline after that, had the hoodie on. It was out of his football uniform there at that point in time. I don't know officially what Kirby Smart's going to say about this, Jeff. I know you'll be watching Twitter on that. I'm going to try to watch that a little bit too. But that is what we know right now, which is unfortunately not all that much. Rib injury for Godwin on the sideline. That's the official word from Georgia, and he'll have 2 weeks here to try to work his way back into health and be ready for the Florida game.
And let me kind of spackle in a few details there because I think Brandon did a really nice job there. But the other things we're talking about here is it looks like it's an internal injury at the very least. You didn't see anything wrapped up. Nothing was iced up. There was nothing bandaged up. It just looked at Terry Godwin. He returned to the field early, late third quarter, early fourth quarter. He was with a, kind of an entourage of trainers and everything else. He was walking very gingerly, and he did walk on his own power. So the rib injury is what's going to stick right now for Georgia. Internal injury is what I kind of feel it might be. And, again, Terry Godwin. And let's also talk about one other kid because I want to make sure his name comes up maybe early in our broadcast.
Okay.
Mecole Hardman.
Yeah.
Terry Godwin comes down. It's football. It's a next man culture. Mecole Hardman, the jet sweep tonight.
He's a blur. He's just a blur.
You got to give a lot of credit to the offensive staff because they got Mecole Hardman a lot of touches, confidence touches, Brandon, where he had to carry the ball in a jet sweep. Then they caught him again on a play coming across the middle. He shaked and baked another guy on that jet sweep as well. But you saw Mecole Hardman in the open field. And I'm going to tell you, I was sitting when he had that touchdown. He was coming right in the recruit bleachers. You heard a collective whoa from all those football players that were in there, and they were like, they got an eye full of speed candy right there. And what that means, Brandon, is they got an eye full of what a fast dude in college football looks like. And then did you see what Mecole did when he got in the end zone? Did you see that? He goes, blows a kiss to the end zone and everything else and all the recruits in there, man.
Well, there you go. That's exactly what you'd expect from a guy like Mecole Hardman, who looked really, really good in a couple of different fronts today. Terrific playmaker. We'll talk a lot more about some of those playmakers that get involved for Georgia in today's game. We'll take more of your comments here as well. One of the comments that I'm seeing a lot of is, hey, where's that Georgia pass rush right now? And that probably kind of also ties into the struggles of the Georgia secondary here today. Is there something that Georgia could have done from a pass rush standpoint to make things a little easier on a Georgia secondary that was clearly overmatched by a, frankly, pretty good group of Missouri wide receivers?
Definitely overmatched. And I think the one guy kind of goes off on them. And for Georgia, it's Emmanuel Hall. He has 4 catches for about 141 yards and 2 touchdowns. Stretched the Georgia defense a lot. Dom Sanders, he gets his interception. He moves into third all-time for Georgia, gets past Kirby Smart in that log jam. But, I'm looking on Twitter right now, and some of the comments are coming out, and this is a classic. Now, let me say this: we don't normally look for likes, but you got to like this about your head coach right now. He says next week. This is what Kirby Smart would say, right? He says in his press conference, next week is not a bye week; it is a work week. Georgia's not taking any leadership reps next week during the bye rep. I can guarantee you that. Yeah,
that's exactly right. They won't be doing that. But let me go back to that secondary and the struggles of that group. So is this a situation where, Georgia had to, obviously your nickel coverage a lot here in this game because of the extra receivers that Missouri had on the field. But, is this one of those games where you point to this pass rush as part of the reason why Missouri does get those long touchdown throws? Or is this something based on your first watch of the game that you put mostly on that Georgia secondary?
I just think Missouri, I think they realized they weren't going to make any hay at all running the ball between the tackles or to the edges. Man, Raquan Smith plays fantastic football. So they knew they had to go vertical passing. They need to go over the top. And, hey, Brandon, I see something that, it's not newsy, but I just want to just kind of interrupt our thought train right here because I think it's just a fun quote. Anthony Dasher, who does a great job for UGAsports.com, he has a quote from Mecole Hardman about why he blew that kiss to the crowd. We just mentioned it, and Mecole, as he met with the media afterward, he said, I did it for the recruits. I wanted to show them what they had to look forward to.
That's nice.
Come on, Brandon.
Nice sentiment right there for sure.
He's fast as all get out, but he's quickly moving into the hearts of DawgNation with a comment like that after a game, right?
Yeah, without a doubt. And that's a guy that was such a popular member of Georgia's 2016 class, one of those big recruits that were brought in there. And really one of those early wins for Kirby Smart. We've said this before, that Smart's 2016 class, which included McCole Hardman, may have been the best ever first class for a guy that had not coached a game as a head coach. You can look at all the annals of coaches in their first recruiting cycle before they played their first season on the field. You'll be hard-pressed to find a guy who had a better class than Smart had for a 2016. Hardman was a part of that, and you're seeing some of those 2016 guys right now making impact on this field for Georgia. And I thought it was really interesting, all the creative ways that Georgia utilized tonight to get Hardman involved in the offense.
I think, let me see, Kirby takes the job on December the 7th. Maybe the world knew he was getting that job a few days earlier than that. National Signing Day is February the 2nd, I believe, that year. Georgia lands 3 5-stars in Kirby's first class. Yeah. And I'm gonna say something. I hope this is not going to bother you. It's going to be a little bit negative about Missouri here.
Okay.
Barry Odom's not going to get 3 5-stars if he coaches in Missouri for 16 years.
Yeah, no.
That's not happening.
That's absolutely not going to happen. But that is Jeff Sentell, and I'm Brandon Adams. It's our Dixie Vodka Postgame Show live here from the UGA Bookstore. The number one for all your UGA apparel needs right here at the Dixie, the UGA Bookstore. The Nike shirts like Jeff and I are wearing. I love Jeff's black. I've got my black and white stripe on. Great-looking stuff. They've got this. You've also seen us wearing our Peter Millar shirts here from the UGA Bookstore, including the Uga 10 line. I was wearing that around Athens Day. Got a lot of compliments on that. If you wear yours, you'll get those compliments as well. Come check all that out here at the UGA Bookstore. We're here after each and every Georgia home game. And, of course, we're also brought to you by Dixie Vodka, the South's best-tasting vodka, made in the South by folks from the South, right there in Charleston, South Carolina, for people like you and me in the South. And nothing goes better with tailgating than the folks from Dixie Vodka. We love Dixie Vodka, and glad to have them here on the Dixie Vodka Postgame Show. All right, you mentioned something a moment ago, and I wanted to take a moment to kind of circle back on that. And that's how injuries are kind of impacting what Georgia has going on in its defensive line right now. We knew coming into today's game that Trent Thompson was not going to play. But we find out, before the game that DeQuan Hawkins-Muckle also going to be inactive today. David Marshall was not going to play as well. During the game, Tyler Clark leaves. That is one of those things where maybe it's Georgia dodging a bullet here because Clark does come back in the game. I don't really have much of an update to provide on Marshall or Hawkins-Muckle right now. But with Clark coming back in, maybe that's an example of dodging a bullet because you're taking what was one of Georgia's real strengths, the depth that it has, the defensive line. Georgia's got as many quality defensive linemen probably as any team in the SEC, maybe any team in college football. But when you start subtracting some of those names because of injury, all of a sudden that obviously is eroded at that point. How big of a concern do you think it should be moving into the crucial games left to come? And with Florida and Auburn losing, those games are still not diminished for Georgia. They're still very important. Against Florida in a couple of weeks, against Auburn in November, Georgia needs all hands on deck for that. How concerned were you by the absence of some defensive linemen today, both for part of the game and the entire game? Some expected, some not.
I think that's what makes Georgia special. I think it's what makes Georgia Alabama-like, having those extra 4 or 5 bodies where they always rotate in fresh and they always come with their best effort there, Brandon. I tell you what, got to get a couple of those guys back. David Marshall, you've heard the rumors there about maybe he's in concussion protocol right now. You also see Trenton Thompson there as well. I think those guys definitely need to be back for Florida. And one thing I'm going to think Georgia's going to be challenged in a different way here, Brandon, is the losses by Auburn and the losses by Florida. It takes a little bit of bloom off the rose for both of those programs. The challenge is ahead, and I think it's going to take a lot of focus and effort from Georgia in order to kind of come in and just be the better team, because they now do have a 2-game cushion on Florida for the SEC East, no matter how snake-bitten they are in that rivalry. And the other thing I'm going to think about this is I wonder what the scene in Jacksonville is really going to look like now with another Florida loss. I was kind of bantering back and forth with another media member about this, and you can kind of see that, connect the dots here. You go Tech game, Georgia, Atlanta usually does well. Georgia, Jacksonville, they might take over that stadium as well. Georgia might play an entire football season this year, and they might only have one game where it is not at least a neutral site, and that's going to be Jordan-Hare Stadium in Auburn.
Right. Yeah.
And I think, to me, all the special things that could happen for this Georgia season, or maybe you want to say about this Georgia season, the fact that Georgia is going to now collectively take over Notre Dame, Tennessee, Vanderbilt, the Gator Bowl, I'm going to call it that, down in Jacksonville. They're going to do it again on the flats on the North Avenue Trade School. I really think that's one of the most impressive things. Not only is Georgia surging right now, and they will move up to number 3. Obviously, that's going to happen there this week.
Yeah.
That their fan base is just eating it up too as well.
Julie Craig says no letdown against the Gators, though. Too much hate there. Julie, I completely agree with that. You know I do. A.J. Hendricks agrees with you. He says Jacksonville is going to be red. And there was a post up at our sister site at seccountry.com a little earlier today. I guess Florida had a lot of no-shows for its game against Texas A&M. So the loss for Florida to LSU last week, I think, kind of opened up some of that apathy for Florida. Maybe you didn't have a full complement of blue and orange in the swamp today for the game against Texas A&M, so you're already seeing some of that. My guess is that Florida fans will still show up for the Georgia game in a couple weeks. Is it majority Georgia fans? It may. Obviously, it starts off at 50%, so it has a chance of being the majority just based on a few Florida no-shows. But we've seen the underdog show up in this game in the past, and unfortunately, it's been Georgia a lot. There is still always a full complement of Georgia fans. We've seen that before, and my guess is Florida will kind of view this, and I'm talking about the team and its fans, as kind of a season unto itself, a sort of a one-game scenario where it can save itself with a win, ruin Georgia's season. My guess is even with Florida losing the last 2 weeks, Georgia still gets the best shot from the Gators coming up here.
Oh, definitely. It's going to be one of those, it's going to be one of those things where they can reset the button on their season with a win against Georgia. How many times has Georgia went into Jacksonville as the favored team, as the better team? I've always felt that rivalry, Brandon, is Georgia needs to be about 17 points better than the Gators to maybe claw out with a 3 to 5 point win. I just think that's always the nature of that rivalry, and Florida's going to be geeked up to try and spoil Georgia's season. And I'm sure you're already reading the stories. You're going to read them over the next 2 weeks. Georgia is 7-0 for the first time since 2005. Yeah. 2005 is when they went down there without DJ Shockley, and they lost that football game.
Yeah, you're exactly right about that, bringing up a not-so-good memory for Georgia fans. Justin Grant, though, on the happy side of things, says Deandre Swift looked good tonight. He really did. I mean, he's so close to breaking everything, it seems, but when you see him go scorching down the field in that 70-plus yard run to set up the Sonny Michel, his second touchdown run of the night, you really get the impression from Swift there that this is he's already inside the bubble of DawgNation. He's already a star, but you get the impression that he's a future star on the full national college football landscape before his time in Athens is done.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about the best way to say this so heresy doesn't just get I don't get shame on our timeline here, Brandon, but I think it is fair to say that he is every bit as explosive as Nick Chubb and Sonny Michel right now.
Oh, I think, yeah, absolutely.
I think that's fair to say. I also think that the young man is being on some of his very big plays. I think about the horse collar against Notre Dame where he fumbles the ball a little bit. And then today I thought the way the defender brought him down again today was a horse collar as well. And I think, what's that stat, Brandon, that surfaced this week? I think the good folks at Pro Football Focus maybe did it or shared it. But he's leading the SEC in percentage of yards that come after first contact.
Wow.
I think 50% of his yards, 56% of his yards come after the first defender has a shot at him. Sonny Michel's right up there in the top 5 as well.
Well, that's eerily reminiscent of Nick Chubb from 2014 because Pro Football Focus also put out a stat on him a couple years ago that you go back to his 2014 season when he was essentially at 1,500 yards rushing. More than half his yards that season came on carries of 15 or more yards. So the same way that Chubb was finding that second level in 2014, that's what Deandre Swift is finding right now. So the comparison between Swift and Chubb I don't think is heresy at all. I think that ultimately the numbers for Swift this year aren't going to be as good because he's not going to have the opportunities that Chubb had in 2014. Chubb was a workhorse in the second half of that season because of the Gurley suspension and injury. But the explosiveness from both these guys in a lot of ways is very similar.
And, this will maybe be, midnight delight a little bit, I guess, for Georgia fans or something like that. But I think the holes that Deandre Swift is running through right now, they might be the consistently smallest of his career at Georgia. That's something that I'm going to weigh my thoughts here. But Georgia's offensive line.
You mean Nick Chubb?
Well, no, Nick Chubb and DeAndre.
Yeah.
The future for DeAndre Swift is, what DeAndre Swift's doing right now, gashing defensive lines and having these big chunk explosive plays. Well, Georgia's offensive line is only going to get better and bigger and older and more seasoned in front of him. And they're going to replace 3- and 4-star recruits with 4- and 5-star recruits. And Georgia is really going to be a running game team for the years to come.
Armand Rashad says Mizzou played dirty, but it didn't help. Boy, you're hearing a lot of that about Missouri. A lot of Georgia fans kind of weighing in on some stuff after the whistle, some stuff low tonight. I saw a lot of stuff down around the knees tonight. A lot of Georgia fans not happy with what they saw from Missouri a little bit this evening.
Yeah, and it's almost like you're going to see what's going on, man. You're going to see. It's kind of hard not to see what's going on, especially late in the game. There were so many plays that kind of drew the ire of the Georgia faithful again, and again you have another game, Brandon, where Georgia, despite not covering the line, did you ever get a full, accurate final count on the spread today?
Last I heard was 30.
It was 30. So
that's the last I heard.
The last touchdown by Missouri obviously skews that a little bit, but 53-28, Brandon, is that the type of ball game you had any idea that was going to happen?
Well, I thought it was a possibility in that. Now, would I have expected Missouri to score 28? Probably not. But could I have expected Missouri to exploit the one weakness we knew that Georgia had? I mean, we talked about that some on DawgNation Daily this week. And Kirby Smart, for what it's worth, did foreshadow this himself. You know, he spoke to the media on Monday and on Tuesday. And in both those media availability sessions for Smart, he tried to pivot back to this is a team that can move the football, this team that can throw it. He liked Drew Lock a lot, and he liked the Missouri wide receivers a lot. He was very complimentary of that group this week. So, you know, in terms of nobody could see this coming, I mean, Kirby Smart, if he would have heard that, he'd roll his eyes because he would say, I tried to tell y'all about that. Now, ultimately, was this a bad night for Georgia? I don't think it rises to the level of being a bad night. I think Georgia's weakness that we knew it has, it still has. And I'm not going to panic about the secondary because we knew that when Georgia was going to play Auburn or play Florida or play, you know, an SEC, you know, team in the SEC championship, we knew it was going to have to coach and play around that anyway. And it's the same way that, you know, on the offensive side of the ball, you may say that this is still an offensive line that's a work in progress. Georgia's not a perfect football team. It's not going to beat everybody, you know, 45-0. It's not quite good enough to do that. But is it good enough to take what could have been a scary close game and turn it into a laugher by the fourth quarter? Yeah, that's what it was able to do tonight.
Yeah, and I mean, perspective, Brandon. I keep kind of doubling down or checking down to perspective here. You do remember this game was, 38-35 on Missouri's home field last year?
Yeah.
3-point. Jacob Eason had to have maybe his finest moment as a Georgia quarterback, finding Isaiah McKenzie for the touchdown as time expires to win that game. And Georgia, maybe they don't cover the spread, but Georgia, they turn this game into a 28, 25-point spread here. And that shows improvement from last year. Remember, Clemson lost this week again.
Yeah.
And, you know, I've got some comments here that are up on DawgNation, fresh hot quotes from DawgNation from the press conference.
Okay, please, go ahead.
What question was asked on what UGA will take into the bye week? Kirby Smart's answer, anybody out there want to guess? Kirby Smart's answer was humility.
Yeah.
Listen to this. There was a question regarding the disparity between Georgia's offense and defense. Kirby Smart says, the offense is growing up. We've got to come up with some answers on defense. We didn't play to the level we needed to on defense, but our offense was spectacular today. Kirby gave out the spectacular today notion for his defense, and there's also a comment about the number 4 ranking. Kirby weighed in, and he says these rankings mean nothing. We're going to get everybody's best shot. Missouri came out and fought hard. We thought they would. And, again, Kirby just, again, kept maybe the narrative, the kind of the focus, the nut graph of the whole press conference for Kirby was offensively. He said the offense really saved us. They did a tremendous job converting third downs, making plays and answering the bell. We had 2 deflating plays defensively, and the offense had the backs of the defense. And that's what a football team should do, Brandon. There's going to be a time. Remember we even said that there's going to be a time when the defense might not be there and the offense was going to have to pick it up. Well, I guess the offense really authoritatively rung the bell for Georgia today.
Since Jeff is bringing up the stats, can we show the final stats one more time? This is our Dixie Vodka final stats here, and I'll give you a quick update. My phone has died, but the Internet's working beautifully right now, so I'll be able to see these stats when you throw them up here. But you see the final score there, 53-28. As you said, the Kirby Smart calls his offense fabulous there. You see why, going right around 700 yards of total offense for the Dogs and holding Missouri to 59 rushing yards. And for me, Jeff, that's the big story here in this game, because if you're going to give up some passing yards, you can still win easily if you shut down the running game. And as we had a commenter mention a moment ago, even with the defensive line injuries, Missouri still could not run the football tonight. And that's one of the reasons why Georgia's not really sweating this thing too much in the fourth quarter.
24 carries for 59 yards. That shows a meek output, but it also shows Missouri really didn't try at all. That's basically 6 carries a quarter.
Yeah.
Trying to get anything going against the Georgia front. And Georgia's run defensive numbers are still going to look good, but maybe some of those SEC total defense and national ranking numbers are going to take a skip a little bit. But then you're going to look on the other side of the ball, and all those numbers about Georgia's passing offense and Georgia's offensive output, they're going to start to look a lot better. I mean, again, it's very rare for one school to go over 300 yards passing and rushing in a league game, even if Missouri might be abysmal.
All right, Blake Wilson, Jake Perez, they're yelling at us because we haven't talked any recruiting yet. So can we do this? Can we move ahead in our show sheet here, and we'll take care of what Jake and Blake want to talk about. And that comes to the recruiting aspect of tonight's game. We know that Daniel Falalele was here taking an official visit. Jaden Hazelwood, I believe, was in the building tonight.
Yeah.
Wanya Morris, the offensive lineman from Grayson High School, I believe he was here. Well, and instead of me guessing, you just tell me who all was here.
Well, let me give you some recruiting thoughts out of today a little bit.
Please.
One thing I noticed today was, again, and this is about, if you don't mind, people, I'm sorry, this might be a Justin Fields story to lead off with, but the thing
we'll take one of those.
The thing I noticed about Justin, it stands out to me already, even when he wasn't committed to Georgia. There's so many recruits that kind of use these games right here as, I'm going to get some hot dogs, I'm going to go hang out, I'm going to get on my Snapchat, I'm going to Instagram some people, and I'm going to be hanging out with my boys. When you watch Justin Fields at a football game, he is laser focused watching the game. I mean, there's a point with maybe 4 minutes left in the first half where all the recruits are trying to get to the food early so there won't be a long line at the buffet. Justin is front and center watching football, being the sponge, absorbing the football.
Let me interrupt for a second. So Stacey Goble's asking, so Fields was here today. So Fields was in the building today.
Oh, yeah, Justin Fields was here today. Front row and center. His family was here. They had the DawgNation polo shirt. I mean, they had his father, Ivant Fields, Pablo Fields, had a UGA polo shirt on today.
Nice.
But, again, my big moment there for Justin is he sits there and studies the game. He is there at a college football game to learn, to watch, to pick up nuances, and that is exactly what you want out of the future leader of a program, a future captain of an offense. That's exactly what you want your quarterback to do. And I'm going to tell you this. I've seen a lot of quarterbacks at games at Georgia and other venues. Not many quarterbacks, especially the nation's number 1 overall prospect, nation's number 1 overall player, doesn't do that. And I got one other quick note. I mean, there's a lot of guys here. Trey Dean was here on his on an unofficial visit.
A lot for that young man to think about right now. Current Tennessee commit. He flirted with South Carolina, flirted with Texas, flirted with a lot of different schools, but a current Tennessee commit, and Tennessee's obviously on fire right now. So I'm sure Trey Dean's got a lot to think about.
I know where you're going with that, Brandon. You're sitting there going, Trey Dean's going, pretty good team. Maybe they need some people back in the secondary to cover some guys and to knock down some balls, and I might be able to do that. One thing I will tell you, and this is hopefully something that I can just share with you guys as quickly as possible. The game ends. Kirby Smart does the interview. He probably goes around, waves at his fans. Let me tell you what he did on his way to the locker room.
Well, yeah, please tell me.
Kirby Smart kind of saunters over to the overhang by the recruiting bleachers, finds Daniel Falalele, slaps him, points at him. That, to me, is a very good moment for – is Georgia interested in Daniel?
Yeah.
Can Georgia use an offensive tackle that's 6'9", 6'8.5", 385, 390 pounds?
Probably calls Michigan his leader right now privately, maybe.
I don't know. I think that decision might come down to Michigan and Georgia.
Okay.
I think Georgia would take Daniel, especially if he wants to come to Georgia. They'd find another room. It's fun. That's funny. I'm starting to say this. I'm not trying to make a pun, but Georgia will find some room for Daniel.
Right, yeah. Which you have to make some space there, some big space. Here's what I'll say about Falalele. I think last year Georgia was not in a position where it could take on a player that I do think of a little bit as a project. A guy that hasn't played a lot of football, that but his size is so intriguing. If Georgia wasn't as deep as it is right now on the offensive line, I'm talking about young guys in the pipeline who are probably going to be certainly given a chance to play and maybe be pretty good, then maybe you couldn't roll the dice on a Falalele. But it's not like if Georgia takes him and passes up on somebody else that Georgia's not going to have its spots filled. I mean, the odds are, Georgia's got its left tackle of the future, maybe an Andrew Thomas, maybe Isaiah Wilson slides over and plays right tackle. You feel really good about your future at guard. Some of those guys are even redshirting right now, but you feel good about your future at guard, which is say nothing about the 2018 kids who are going to be coming in. I mean, Georgia's going to have plenty of dependable offensive linemen that you can roll the dice here. What if this 6'9", almost 400-pound guy turns into a real player? All of a sudden, that was absolutely worth the risk that you put on this. I don't know that Georgia could roll the dice on a project for the 2017 class, but in the 2018 class, I think it probably could.
Well, especially, here's a name that's not recruiting, but it's development and player development. I think Ben Cleveland's going to become an option for Georgia next year.
No, I don't think it's over for him at all. Not at all.
So when you think about Georgia at offensive tackle, I think Andrew Thomas is clearly the left tackle of the future at Georgia, a future SEC, all-SEC left tackle.
Yeah. Like maybe next year. He may be all-SEC, first team next year.
Definitely. And then you've got a guy that sits there and you're looking at Isaiah Wilson. Is he going to make it? Is he going to maybe mesh his way into the starting lineup? Don't know. Maybe he has to get a little bit better with conditioning, a little bit better with adjusting to the Georgia heat. Maybe needs to get a little bit better with all of his play polish, everything he needs to do, his techniques. Not as well coached as Andrew Thomas was at Pace Academy. Not saying anything about Poly Prep at all. I'm just saying that Pace Academy is a big-time offensive line school.
Yeah, the instruction you're getting there is top-notch. And, Kirby Smart actually said that the other day. Do you remember him saying this? He alluded to that. It's almost like a coded message the same way. He's done that a couple times.
Coded message, Peach County. Coded message, Peach County.
Yeah, Peach County, Pace Academy. He said the other day the good quarterbacks don't care about depth charts. That's a coded message for Justin Fields. Smart likes to do that kind of thing from time to time. And the latest to kind of get one of those was Jamari the other day.
You want to see some coded messages up to maybe Rome High School, some coded messages up to West Forsyth High School? North Carolina?
Absolutely, yeah. I'd love to see that message travel up to North Carolina and into Rome where Mr. Anderson is. I'd love that.
Or maybe a coded message for all of IMG Academy and just to get as many of those senders as they possibly can.
And after tonight, Gilbert Frierson, Tyson Campbell, Tyreek Johnson, maybe some messages to them as well.
Yeah, so Georgia, other Robert Cooper, I think, was a big name that showed up.
That's a big one. Another one of these schools that's a mess right now is Florida State. You flip Robert Cooper from South Gwinnett to Georgia from Florida State. That's a huge win for Georgia.
I was talking to another media member today, and I was thinking about Georgia's recruiting class and kind of what it could possibly be. And we like to throw out these recruiting terms and everything else that we do because we try to cover recruiting like the Dickens here at DawgNation.
Yeah.
But Georgia, to me, might be inventing a term called a silent decommit. Brandon, have you ever heard of that before? Yeah. Have you ever heard that before?
I like that idea. Yeah.
I think there are several decommitments that Georgia is targeting right now in recruiting. And maybe we should just kind of call them a silent decommitment and everything else like that. I think Georgia is in great shape with a lot of guys.
Yeah, Michigan, Georgia's coming for your linebacker. I hate to tell you that. Florida State, your defensive lineman. I'm not telling you Georgia's going to definitely get him, but they're certainly coming for him. Alabama, your defensive end. Georgia's going to make a shot there.
Florida State, your 2019 offensive tackle, Wanye Morris. Yeah. Let me tell you this, Florida State fans, and I doubt we have any sort of Seminole fans on this feed right now.
Yeah.
Wanye Morris, his birthday is today. He had a slight back injury he suffered against Archer. He got it looked at, got a little bit of therapy this morning. And guess where Wanye Morris, I think the number 5 offensive tackle for 2019, guess where he shows up on his birthday?
Right here in Athens, Georgia.
With a little bit of an achy-breaky back a little bit.
Right here in the Classic City. Sitting on an aluminum bleacher. Or I guess it's not an aluminum bleacher for the recruits, but he's sitting on a hard chair at least.
And guys, I know check out our Facebook videos because if you want to say follow the visits, I'm going to tell you this. I put up a Facebook Live, not a Facebook Live, but a Facebook video of the Krypton Fanfare, the Light It Up again tonight.
Nice.
You're rolling when you're the University of Georgia recruiting department. When you've got recruits in the recruiting bleachers holding up their phones and doing the Light It Up, Brandon.
That's nice.
There were several recruits in there doing the Light It Up. with their phones and everything else, and they were having themselves a good time at Georgia.
All right, I want to finish with the Georgia-Florida talk. Sherry Sadler wants an update on Terry Godwin. We'll do that. Let me, before I do that, remind you, Jeff Sentell, Brandon Adams, a couple more minutes from us here live from the UGA Bookstore. Number one spot for all your UGA apparel needs is right here at the UGA Bookstore. We're here after every Georgia home game. We're brought to you by Dixie Vodka tonight, the South's best tasting vodka. It's really no debate. Obviously in the South, there are lots of college football debates this time of year, but when it comes to the South's best tasting vodka, that is clear and without question, Dixie Vodka right there in Charleston, South Carolina is where it is distilled, and you will love Dixie Vodka at your tailgate. Or really, tomorrow morning you wake up, you want a little Bloody Mary, Dixie Vodka will go great with that as well. All right, Sherry Sadler wants to know about Terry Godwin, so let's update this rib injury one more time. So not a whole lot being said about this. Out for now is the official designation we got during the game. But we do know that that this is a big position of need for Georgia going in that Florida game. Godwin is the receiver that I believe that Fromm is the most comfortable with, and that is a guy that Georgia fans are going to be really holding their breath for on that update. But it's a rib injury. He went to the locker room, got treated, came back, stood on the sideline. But as you said, the real story here was leaving the locker room to come back on the field, how slowly he was walking, really, really slowly.
Yeah, he was a guy that I guess the word is like what our grandmothers always use or moms always use, gingerly. I think that's kind of the way he was. Kind of like had a sauntering, maybe like a John Wayne, like he'd been riding on his horse for a little bit too long. He was just going very slowly. His feet were clearly, shoulders width apart, just really slowly.
Yeah.
Came back on the field. He didn't have anything wrapped up, nothing bandaged, nothing iced. He was kind of escorted by the trainers, but he did come out on the field under his own power.
Tom Lavelle reminds us something important here, too. The other injury that happens during the game is Tyler Clark, or at least the other injury that we're aware of and talking about right now. Clark does come back in the game. So that's really a crisis averted right there, because I don't think Georgia wants to be dealing with an injury to Trent Thompson and Tyler Clark at the same time. But I'm assuming that Clark is probably fine. To my knowledge, there was never even any kind of official update on Clark anyway. They never came over the press box and said anything about Clark that I can remember during the game, and he just eventually went back in. So Clark going back in was good news.
I tell you, that's a scary moment, Brandon. You cover all these football games for for a living, and you're here at Georgia a lot, or anywhere, and you see the headline and you hear the word that Terry Godwin's family was going down to the Georgia locker room.
There was that report,
to kind of confront him and comfort him or whatever, and that's something you very rarely see, and that's one of those things that make you kind of just take a breath a little bit, because it is a violent game these boys play.
And listen, DawgNation's praying for Terry Godwin tonight, and the Godwin family. We hope that good news is coming your way here really soon on that young man. All right, let me finish with this. If you listen to DawgNation daily, you know what the next 2 weeks are going to be like for us. This is a really big deal, and I need all hands on deck. I need every Georgia fan ready for this thing. Whether you're going to the game, whether you're watching on television, Florida, 2 weeks from now, I don't care what their record is. I don't care if you think Georgia's going to win 42-0. You got to go into 2 Saturdays from now with your eye on the ball. This is a big one for this fan base. This is a big one in 2 weeks.
Now, I'm going to tell you this. This is one of those. This is Brandon's game. This is Brandon's game here. So, guys,
this is my Super Bowl. Not saying that there won't be something after this, but for now, all I care about is beating Florida.
You might have heard there's a T-shirt called Gator Haters.
Oh, yes.
That I don't know whether there's a special edition in the work, but I want to know, you wonderful dog people out there, what are we going to get out of Brandon out of these next 2 weeks? We're going to get a work week?
We're going to have a blast. We're going to have a blast. We're going to have the next 2 weeks are going to be so much fun. Now, I'm going to be tense like this, getting ready for it, and we're getting ready to wrap up here. But as we do, I will tell you, the next 2 weeks are going to be so much fun, because I can't wait to hear from every Georgia fan about how much this Florida rivalry means to them. The bad games you've sat through, the horrible losses, or if you're old enough to remember the great days in the 80s when Georgia was on top in this series, or if you were at the 97 game, I know you were. The 2004 game, I was a part of that. Many of you saw the 2007 game. We're going to reminisce about the good times, the bad times, and everything else in between, because 2 weeks from now, this rivalry is changing. I believe it's changing forever, and I cannot wait for you.
Are you going to be like a David Letterman with the top 10 reasons, a top 10 list every day or something like that? And here's what I'm calling for you. I want you guys to just get on this guy's case and let him know this. I think for these next 2 weeks, DawgNation Daily should become Junkyard Dog Nation Daily. I think that's what it should become. Let me know if you guys agree with it. We got to get Brandon's A-plus game these next 2 weeks.
All right. That's Jeff Sentell. I'm Brandon Adams. Thanks to Roxy and Michael for helping us be on the air here. Of course, our home away from home for the UG home games at the UGA bookstore. We appreciate their hospitality. Biggest thanks of all, though, goes to Dixie Vodka. They bring the Dixie Vodka Postgame Show to you each and every week. They have the South's best-tasting vodka. I'll see you Monday for DawgNation Daily, starting at 10 a.m. We'll start getting ready for that game against the Gators. Jeff will have intel with all the reaction from recruits who were in the building today. In between now and then, a whole bunch of stuff from Chip Towers, Seth Emerson at DawgNation.com. Y'all read it. I'll see you Monday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and let's get ready for the cocktail party in 2 weeks. It's going to be a blast. We'll talk to you then.